Okay, I'm at our hotel in Bamako, where I've come for a couple weeks to try to hopefully save the business because things are really difficult in Bamako, Mali right now. But I'm not going to talk too much about that. I'm going to focus on a timeline today, a timeline of benzo withdrawal symptoms that I dealt with that may be useful for you. I have a seat over here on this beer crate, broken beer crate. There we go. I made another post where I talked about how long benzo withdrawal symptoms can last. And obviously it's different for everyone, and it depends on what you took, how long you took it, and at which dosage. In my case, I took Ativan, mostly Ativan. I started on Valium. It's not great that I'm out of breath after walking up that flight of stairs. Jesus Christ. I took Valium to start with, and then I switched over to Ativan. And if you watch my video about how and why I started taking benzodiazepines, you can get that whole story. But at the end, I was taking 1 milligram of Ativan, and I tapered. Over a 2-month period, I tapered down to 0.5 milligrams, held there for a month, and I went down to 0.25 milligrams and held there for a month before jumping off. First thing that happened when I took my last benzodiazepine, some people ask, so about the taper itself, I didn't have any of the withdrawal symptoms I dealt with later on during the taper. I felt off often, and I had issues with like fatigue and my energy levels, but I didn't, and higher anxiety. Definitely. My anxiety was way up, and I was very, like, my nervous system was way sensitive to things, but I didn't have any of the withdrawal symptoms I'm about to describe now. That all happened after I stopped taking my last dose. So to start with, the first couple of days, I actually thought that maybe I wasn't going to have withdrawal symptoms that were that catastrophic. I had basically a couple days where I just spent like in bed most of the day. I just felt like I had been hit by a truck. I was on a vacation with my family, and this was during COVID times. I honestly thought I could have had COVID as well, and I just took myself out of the lineup. I was just in bed. I just felt like I'd been hit by a truck. But I was also kind of thinking, okay, well, this is fatigue, and it wasn't so bad. It was maybe the third day in that I had my first episode of depersonalization, derealization. And it happened at night as I was trying to go to sleep, and it was absolutely terrifying. If you don't know what that symptom is like, it's this feeling of being outside yourself, of being somehow disconnected from your brain and body. And it's a disassociation. It sounds kind of trippy, but it's actually really awful. I do apologize. There's like a couple of flies cruising around here. Normally this early in the morning, they're not already out cruising around, but yeah, they are up and at it. And I also look like a burn victim because I use this chemotherapy cream from my dermatologist because I had all these I had a basal cell carcinoma before, and then I had all these suspicious spots that this cream's hopefully wiping out. Thankfully, I didn't have that much of a reaction with the mast cell issues that I have, but anyway, I apologize for all of that. I should go back to drawing the birds, but I don't have a good setup for that here at the hotel at the moment. Anyway, depersonalization and derealization. A lot of times people feel like they see themselves from outside their body, like they're looking at themselves from outside. Some of these things, it sounds like you hear, it's like, well, that sounds kind of trippy. It sounds like it's not so bad. It's fucking terrifying. And the feeling of being like untethered from your brain, from your identity, and like your brain is scrambling to get back to cling to something. It's like you're floating in the abyss, like in space. It'd be like someone going on a spacewalk and getting untethered, and just, except you're talking about you being tethered to your brain and your identity. Losing that it's absolutely terrifying, and that would trigger like panic attacks, and it was so that started happening about 3 days in, and that really continued for about 6 months. Not all the time, not every night, not every day, but those episodes would happen throughout those. I think after 6 months, the DPDR, depersonalization, derealization, I could say that those were, I didn't have them after that time period. I actually wrote down a few things here because memory issues is a thing I'm still dealing with. And I'm nearly 2 years out. In July, 3 months from now, I'll be 2 years off benzodiazepines. Athesia. I've made a couple videos about akathisia. Akathisia I dealt with during the first 2 months, sporadically. Thank fuck it was sporadic. If it was happening every day on a chronic daily basis, I don't know what I probably would have reinstated with the benzodiazepines because akathisia is so horrific. You can watch one of my other videos about akathisia. I think it's called What They Don't Tell You About Akathisia, and it's just how we use really sanitized terms to talk about akathisia that don't really capture the misery and torture that it really is. But akathisia I had for the first 2 months. It wasn't all the time. It'd be episodes, and sometimes I had to take like a massive dose of Benadryl. This is not medical advice. I'm not recommending this, but for me, it was an over-the-counter solution, and Benadryl doesn't interfere with your GABA receptors, which are what's really been torched by benzodiazepines. And you have to be careful with anything that interferes with those receptors as they're healing, because it can disrupt the healing. Benadryl doesn't interact with those receptors. Benadryl does cause, there's potential other issues with Benadryl, especially they've shown long-term outcomes pointing you towards neurodegenerative diseases and stuff like this if you take it habitually. Anyway, for me to navigate through that period, I was very thankful for it. So when I had akathisia, like at certain moments, Benadryl was something that kind of calmed me down a bit. It didn't always work. One thing I noticed with akathisia is that it could be brought on by like a stressful situation, like there was triggers. And I noticed, like I tried to have a cup of coffee at one point early on, and that really brought on, it seemed to have brought on an episode of akathisia. You know, there's so many things that you really have to be careful with what you ingest. Food, drinks, supplements, vitamins, everything. So akathisia for the first 2 months. After 2 months, I think the akathisia, I can say honestly, I didn't have another episode after 2 months of akathisia. I'm very thankful for that. I did have, what they call restless leg syndrome. This was something that continued for beyond the akathisia anyway. I would say probably at least 3 to 4 months restless leg syndrome, particularly in the evenings, trying to go to bed, trying to sleep. Tinnitus also about 3 months. Anhedonia, that was really in that first 3 month block as well, and that's it's described as an inability to feel pleasure. You know, it's like you're feeling a certain numbness. But again, when you look at these terms on like a medical institution website, these descriptions, they're kind of sanitized, and the language doesn't really capture how deep, how awful something can be. You know, we don't have words for some of these things, like akathisia especially. We don't really have words to capture the experience. Anhedonia is another thing that it's worse than it sounds on paper. Anyway, if you're dealing with it, you know what I'm talking about. That was like the first 3 months. I mean, I wrote stress, anxiety, panic attacks, anger, and rage. That was that continued like especially the first 6 months, and then it became between months 6 and 9 less common, less often. But up until month 9, those were all very much a part of my life. I can say month 9 for me was the turning point on some of the symptoms that were really disrupting my life. Month 9 for me, month 9 off of benzodiazepines was really a turning point. Now, I've written down here MCAS, which I've made a couple videos about now, mast cell activation syndrome, which for me, in my opinion, is linked to my benzodiazepine withdrawal. I had COVID infection as well, but it really kicked off after I took my last dose of benzodiazepines. So mast cell activation syndrome, my symptoms are like congestion, which leads to a cough, my ears get blocked up, migraines, and sometimes having like palpitations and stuff like that. All of these symptoms I'm still dealing with now. And I am, 21 months off. It's a lot better. I'm going to make a video about the supplements and stuff I take. I take a lot of vitamins and supplements, not medications. I do take antihistamines as well. That's helped cause some dramatic improvement with that. I would like to think over time there's been some healing as well on that front. My mast cells are kind of, I don't know, getting back in line a bit, but the jury's still out on that. I don't know whether this is going to be a lifetime chronic condition. For most people, MCAS is a chronic condition, but there's been very few studies done on a possible link between benzodiazepine withdrawal and mast cells. We also still don't know with COVID that interaction with mast cells, if it's, it's instigated a permanent situation, a chronic condition or not. Oh, sleep starts. Yeah, those I still deal with. And that really started during the benzo withdrawal. They call, hypnic jerks, they sometimes call them. Basically, when you are laying down, oftentimes when you're trying to fall asleep, and you kind of have this like violent movement, like your body has this like mini convulsion type thing. And for me, it's terrifying. I usually instinctively like grab for trying to feel my pulse or like my heart. It's like, it almost feels like someone just used like a defibrillator on me, or my body's like trying to like kickstart itself. Like maybe my heart was slowing down, and all of a sudden my body's like, hey, don't don't die on us or something. Which is, I have health anxiety as well, which has improved a lot since I got off benzodiazepines. My health anxiety is better than it was before I started taking benzodiazepines, and health anxiety was a big reason I started taking them in the first place. So that's an encouraging sign for anyone of you that has health anxiety. I'll talk about some of the things that have helped me improve in a minute, but so 21 months off, I'm still dealing with, MCAS, the mast cell stuff, and the symptoms around it. Sleep starts. I'll say though, the sleep starts, the hypnic jerks have happened. They've been fewer and far between, but they still happen every now and then. And then the last thing I wrote here: brain fog, memory loss, cognitive issues. Definitely still dealing with that. I saw someone walk into our hotel here, and I recognized them immediately, and I still, to right now, can't remember their name. That might sound like something that can happen to anyone, but this was a person I had enough interactions with, and it was recently enough that it was baffling to me. And other memory issues as well, not just around people's names and identities and stuff like that, because that can be kind of isolated maybe to one part of your brain. Other memory issues, cognitive issues, that has improved a lot. I mean, I will say, I don't really like talking to the camera, even when I don't look like a firefighter from Chernobyl. I don't like talking to the camera so much. That's why I was doing the drawing videos, which I still might do more of, though. It seems like it's really confused some people, because there were some people watching it either because they were interested in drawing or birds or both, and not anything about benzodiazepines. So that kind of defeats the purpose. Although you're welcome to watch, I guess you could mute the video and watch me drawing shitty birds, mostly shitty birds. But anyway, brain fog, yeah, cognitive issues. Before I would not be able to talk to the camera. Like if it was at month 6 or month 9 or even a year, I would say probably even a year and a half out. Maybe not a year and a half. I guess I'm not far from a year. I would say, a year out, I would not be able to do this right now, what I'm doing. I would not be able to talk to the camera and articulate myself in any way that would be comprehensible to you. Or I would just have to stop and think. I wouldn't be able to put sentences together in a way that I could have like a conversation. That's improved a lot. I'll say that all of those symptoms have improved a lot. The memory issue is probably what stands out the most to me as something I'm still struggling with. Nearly 2 years out, I don't know, if there's still room. I've talked to some people online. They say, they continued seeing improvement like 3 and 4 years down the road. It's just the improvements become smaller, more marginal, less noticeable while they're happening. But over time, you can start to take stock of them. It's like the watch pot never boils or whatever. you can't see the change when it's happening. And that's really something to emphasize throughout the healing of benzodiazepines. The day-to-day can be so difficult, and the progress you make is not in a straight line. So it's like you make progress and then you have a setback, and then it's kind of like this, and then you can have a huge trough where things go down. It could be could be life things that trigger it, or something. In my case, I ate or drank or something, and then but the overall trend was it kept going up. And I just want to say that despite how awful, benzodiazepine withdrawal was without a doubt the worst thing I ever dealt with in my life, but I have absolutely no regrets about it. And my life before I got off benzodiazepines, it's true there was less anxiety, but as I said in another video, life had become really kind of colorless, and it just kind of flatlined in a way, where I had this low energy, kind of permanent fatigue, and all the vibrancy, kind of the joy, the color of life had just been sucked out of it. And I was having brain fog and memory issues and cognitive issues already when I was taking the benzodiazepines. Benzodiazepines, there's been studies that show that habitual use of these drugs over the long term puts you on a track towards neurodegenerative disorders. These are not good for our brains. They're not good for our brains. Now, through some lifestyle changes, I used to drink a lot. I did not exercise before. There's, a number of things I do now with my life that make it so I actually am better than my baseline. I've actually improved past where I was before I first started taking the benzodiazepines. And obviously everyone's different, and everyone's path that led them to benzodiazepines is different. The amount of time they've been taking them, the dose, the particular benzodiazepine. But I will say, I don't want to lecture anyone here. I just want to share my personal experience. But for me, despite the horrific experience I had that brought me to the brink, in those first couple of months, there was so many points where I was like, what, I just have to get back on. I just have to stop taking the benz. I have to start taking the benzos again. I'm just gonna have to live my life taking these, and I would just get through that moment, get through that day, or whether it's an hour, a couple hours, get through that day, kind of mark it on my calendar. It was like a little celebration, with my calendar, getting through a day, because that each day that you get through, there's some healing happening, even if you can't see the signs of it, you don't notice it, it's happening. It's happening. Anyway, that's a bit of a timeline for symptoms and hopefully a little bit of kick in the ass for some motivation at the end. I'm gonna go for a walk before it gets too hot. I think the forecast is for another massive heat wave to start right now in Bamako, which is not great because we have, yesterday we had over 20 hours in electricity cuts. Anyway, wish me luck. Walking something, that's helped me a lot. Going for walks. Got our sage over here. Got our rosemary over here. I hope Sage and Rosemary get along, because they're going to be spending some time together. And then we've got, let's see, Annette, that's dill. We're here. Chababulu, that's like, those are chives. And then we've got borage. There we go.